If you're spending hours highlighting textbooks, reviewing your notes, and pulling all-nighters, but not seeing the grades that you want, it might not be your effort, it might actually be your strategy. And you are not alone. So many students fall for common study myths that actually hurt their learning instead of helping. Today I'm breaking down 4 of the biggest study myths about studying and learning that might be tanking your grades. And of course, I am going to show you what to do instead. Let me know in the comments which of these myths you have believed or maybe even currently believe. I'll bet at least one of them has tripped you up before. After all, these myths are super convincing, even for smart students like you. Hi, I'm Katie Azevedo of SchoolHabits.com. I'm a private executive function coach who teaches students and professionals strategies to learn and work smarter. And part of learning and working smarter is knowing what works and what doesn't. One of the biggest study myths out there is that studying longer is better. You have probably seen those study with me videos where someone studies, they're right here on YouTube for 5 or 6 hours straight, making it look like that is the key to success. Spoiler alert, it is so not the key to success. Yes, learning takes effort and time, but we cannot hijack the biological process behind learning. And we cannot speed it up the way we so wish we could. But marathon studying sessions and all-nighters never ever pay off the way we think or hope they will. What actually works is studying in smaller chunks over several days. If you've been with me before, you know that this is called spaced repetition. Now, let's look at some examples of using spaced repetition to map out some study sessions for what I would call a basic high school, college, or even graduate level test. Here's the first example of 2 different variations of spaced repetition in preparation for the same test. So here you'll see that we have a test on Friday and 1 week to prepare. So we have a 30-minute session right away. Then we skip a day, but we give ourselves a hefty 60-minute session here. Nothing longer than 60 minutes in one sitting. And then we wait a few days for that material to fade a little bit. This break, this waiting is deliberate and important. And then we give ourselves another half hour the night before the test and a quick 20-ish minute review the day of. Now that's just one way to do it, but let's look at another. We're going to look at another example of the same Friday test, the same 1 week to prepare. So here we're giving ourselves more study sessions over more days, and in some cases, multiple study sessions in the same day. But notice in this example, the longest study session is 30 minutes. Everything else is 20 to 25. So if you look at Sunday and Tuesday, we're actually working in the power of spaced repetition within these days right here, as well as over the course of the week. In both examples, the minutes add up to about the same. I did the math. I think there's like a 10-minute difference, but I'm showing you multiple example schedules so you can see how even if you're super busy or even if you have ADHD and the idea of even a 45-minute study session is just not in the cards for you, you can still use spaced repetition. I have a very good spaced repetition tutorial where I teach the science behind spaced repetition. The link will be in the description box. If you're the kind of person who needs to know why something works before committing to it, that's for you. But in a nutshell, our brains need more time between study sessions to allow ourselves to nearly forget what we're learning so that our next study session strengthens the neural networks as it attempts to remember information from the previous session. Another reason it's a study myth to believe that studying more is better is that true knowledge acquisition happens when we use the right study methods. True knowledge acquisition does not happen when we study a lot using the wrong study methods. All right, so although different study techniques work for different students, the most effective study methods for anyone utilize active recall. Lots of study strategies use active recall, like making your own flashcards, doing problem questions, filling in blank worksheets and diagrams, being test it out loud, maybe writing things out over and over again, perhaps using the blurting method. I'll link that up here or down below if I can figure that stuff out. But all of these are active recall study methods. But what does not count as active recall study methods are rereading notes, rereading textbooks, scrubbing through videos to review the material, just sort of like scrolling through slides. None of that is active recall. And sadly, I have seen so many students spend hours rereading their notes and their textbooks only to do poorly on their test. This is a classic example of spending a lot of time on the wrong study methods and getting no results. And that's what leads to the deepest, most obnoxious frustration, right? We're like, I studied, I really did. I put in the time and effort to do the thing, to learn the thing. Why does my grade not reflect the work I put in? Nobody's questioning the work that you put in. It's just the wrong type of work. Does that make sense? The solution is to use a combination of active recall study methods and a spaced repetition study schedule. Don't worry if it feels hard. It will feel hard. And we're going to talk about that in myth number 3. But that feeling of this is so hard, that's how you know it's working. Right? I dive deeper into active recall on my Learn and Work Smarter podcast episode on active recall. I'll link the YouTube version of that episode below. And then if you're really looking to transform your study methods and start learning without all of the drama, I teach you exactly how to use active recall across multiple contexts and multiple subjects inside my online course, School Habits University, also linked below. All right, myth number 2. Let's talk about this idea that grades are the most important thing in school. Look, I get it. Grades matter. They matter for GPAs and college applications and future opportunities and internships, right? That's just the reality that grades matter. But when we focus on grades more than learning, what we're really doing is bass backwards. Can I say that? Bass. I said bass backwards. And we actually end up doing worse in the long run. I know it is so ironic to think that focusing on grades leads to worse grades, but let me explain. When we focus only on getting good grades, we tend to opt for memorization rather than learning. Students who only look for the grade and want to bypass or hack their way through the learning process are the same students who look for the shortcuts and the hacks. Right? And honestly, these are the students who are likely to fall for some common study myths in the first place. Now, the problem is that memorization tricks us into thinking that we know the material. But knowing something, word for word, the ability to regurgitate A when somebody says B, that doesn't mean that we know what we're talking about or that we can apply it to an actual exam question. Memorization is super temporary, which means that it fades fast, usually within a couple hours, maybe even less than that. But learning, on the other hand, sticks with us. If we actually learn the material, the grades will follow. Right? Tests, no problem, because we know the material. Essays, bring it because we know the material. Pop quizzes, give it to me because we know the material. Right? Almost anybody can get an A on a simple homework assignment or a simple classwork assignment without really knowing what they're doing. But what happens during an exam? What happens when we have to write an essay from the material? We're not going to get that A, or not even the B, or maybe not even the C, because we never really knew what we were doing in the first place. I say this all of the time, and I'm going to say it again. Learning the material from the very beginning by paying attention in class and doing the homework assignments for real is the darn shortcut. If you've gotten this far in school with the mentality that shortcuts and hacks mean that you have beat the system, oh, my friend, how wrong you are. And I say that with love because I want this information to land before you learn that lesson in a way that is irreversible. Okay, do the work. Learn the material. That is the real hack. All right, next up. The myth that learning should be easy. Let me just say this. If studying feels too easy, you're probably not doing it right. There is nothing about learning that is easy. Even if you like the material and find it relevant, the actual mental process of learning things is challenging for everyone. Learning is easy is what we want to be true. Okay, we all want studying to feel good. We want the satisfaction of knowing things, and we want to avoid the uncomfortable reality that there are things that we don't know yet that we are expected to know. When we use active recall methods like testing ourselves or solving practice problems, we will feel sticky and itchy and like we want to escape the moment, right? But that is normal. In fact, I would argue that 75% of the learning process is just forgetting things over and over and over again. It is only in the last 25% that things start to click. But uncomfortable things are nothing more than uncomfortable things, and we don't have to make them mean anything else. I'm going to say that again. Uncomfortable things are nothing more than uncomfortable things, and we don't have to make them mean anything else. So if you're frustrated while studying, stick with it. That's the point. Okay, number 4, the last myth. This is a sneaky one. Thinking that because we understand something while we're doing our homework means we will know it for the test. Nothing could be further from the truth. So many students I work with get flustered when they can solve algebra problems or maybe answer chemistry questions or label a diagram on their homework, but they are unable to do the same thing on their quizzes or exams. Here's the thing. When we are doing homework or classwork, we have access to all of our resources, our notes, our textbooks, Google, right? And so if we get stuck on a question, we Google it. If we forget how to do a calculus question, we can just look in our notes. This is exactly what we should do, and it's part of the learning process. But the learning process does not and cannot stop there. The only way to know if you are ready for an assessment is to test yourself without your resources. Now, when I am studying with students, I will often test them on a process-based question that's going to be on their real test, maybe something like math or science. They will get to a certain point in the process, they'll get stuck, they'll be tempted to look at their notes, but I'm not going to let them. And then they almost always say something like, oh, I'll be fine on the test. Like, I know how to do it. I just can't do it right now. Listen, if you knew how to do it, you'd be able to do it. Right? It is so much easier to tell ourselves that we know something when we don't than it is to admit that we have just a teeny tiny bit more to go. The solution is to practice under test-like conditions so you can separate what you know from what you don't know yet. Fill out your blank study guides, label your diagrams, take your practice quizzes, use the blurting method or the Feynman technique, all without your study resources in front of you. The questions you miss or the material that you can't fully and accurately recall without looking at your notes is the stuff that you'll have to go back and review more. Repetition, my friends. Let's go. All right, and here's the bottom line. If you've been falling for any of these study myths, it's all good. Like, it's all good from now on. It's not your fault. These myths are everywhere, even from teachers and here on YouTube. But now that you know the truth, now that we have busted, it's gonna sound corny, busted these myths, you can start doing things differently. Use active recall. Space out your study sessions. Focus on learning, not just on grades. And most importantly, don't quit when it gets uncomfortable, because that is when the magic happens. Do the work. Do the thing. That is the shortcut. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments which of these myths you are guilty of believing and what you're going to be doing differently going forward. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future videos. I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for watching.